This week on Business Brief, we look at the economic impact of an AI factory coming to Kansas City. Then we hear from a researcher about the factors driving a projected increase in Missouri's net farm income. Welcome to Business Brief, Missouri Business Alert's podcast focused on the business news and issues shaping the state. My name is Noah Grabianski, and I am joined by my co-host, Riley Hindle. Riley, how are you doing this week?
I'm actually doing really good this week. We're finally to November, and the weather feels like it's beginning to catch up with the calendar for once.
I don't know if you've noticed, even though it's November, I am seeing Christmas things all over stores.
Yeah, it definitely seems like holiday items are available to buy sooner and sooner every year.
Oh yeah, it is like a tradition in my family that we do not do any Christmas things until the day after Thanksgiving.
Oh, but you know what's not too early to start? Headlines.
That's right.
The U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments Wednesday on the legality of President Donald Trump's tariffs, which small businesses say are upending their livelihoods. The case examines whether or not the president can authorize widespread tariffs through the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Trump is the first president to use the statute to impose taxes on imports, as it is typically used for economic sanctions against countries the U.S. is in conflict with. No verdict was delivered, but justices raised questions about the number of countries targeted and the goals of the tariffs.
The federal government shutdown is now the longest on record as the U.S. Senate again failed to advance a stopgap spending bill. The Senate remains at odds over concerns about the expiration of health care tax subsidies. Analysis has found that those currently receiving the tax credit could see their monthly premium payment more than double if the credit were to expire. An official from the U.S. Treasury said the shutdown costs the economy as much as $15 billion a week, according to a report from the White House Council of Economic Advisors.
The Federal Aviation Administration announced that it would scale back air traffic by 10% across 40 high-volume airports starting Friday. Officials said the move was meant to maintain travel safety as airports experience shortages of air traffic controllers, and those that continue to work without pay due to the government shutdown show signs of strain. Some of the busiest airports in the nation will be affected, such as those in Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, Dallas, and several more.
A judge on Thursday ordered the Trump administration to fully fund Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits for November. A memo from the U.S. Department of Agriculture on Wednesday said that the federal government would pay 65% of the monthly SNAP benefits. The department plans to pull from a contingency fund with about $4.6 billion in available funds. With this update, many state officials are unsure how long it will take to deliver benefits to recipients.
Southern rust, a disease affecting corn, has been identified in 25 counties in Missouri. A wet growing season and high humidity fostered the spread of the infection. The disease lowers the nutritional value and digestibility of the corn, which could pose a challenge to the dairy industry that relies on corn for feed. However, since it thrives in warm weather, experts said it is unlikely to survive the Missouri winter.
Individual marketplace health insurance premiums in Missouri are set to rise next year, with some seeing as much as a 30% increase. With open enrollment already underway, customers are unsure if those numbers will rise even more should Congress allow Affordable Care Act tax subsidies to expire. Our first story this week takes a look at an AI superintelligence cloud company called Lambda, setting up shop in Kansas City.
AI data centers have been popping up more and more in recent years. What does this mean for the local economy?
A representative from Lambda said the move will create new jobs in the area as the company prepares to begin construction to take over an unoccupied building in Kansas City, with hopes to begin operations early next year.
So what does that mean for the people living in the area?
Well, that's exactly what reporter Charlie Duffin wanted to find out. He spoke with Ken Patchett, Lambda's vice president of infrastructure, about what the company's new data center in Kansas City could mean for people both locally and nationally. Here's more of that story.
Thank you so much for joining me. Can you define the superintelligence cloud a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. So define superintelligence cloud. Here's what's cool, man. It's not many times in a career that you get to actually work into shepherding in a new age. So here we are now where we've used our human intellect to create artificial intelligence, which is basically a tool. It's a tool that's a force multiplier for your intellect. So when you think about the idea of compute technology giving us the opportunity to share or learn or understand things we would have a more difficult time to understand in the past. For instance, I now have in one place the knowledge of nearly every PhD in the world. And that knowledge is in one place, where before it was separated by geography and ego, right? The next evolution, the superintelligence age, gives me access to all that knowledge and information that exists before, but now it gives me a much more rich picture and a much more bigger view of it. So when I talk about superintelligence being a tool that is a force multiplier for the human intellect, what I really mean is it helps us to narrow down those things and those combinations of things that might actually help us get to the answers that we're looking for. So superintelligence is actually that. It's this next iteration, this next evolution of technology, actually allowing humans to be more curious, curiouser and curiouser, right? Is the way I would think about it.
So this data center recently moved into, or you guys announced a plan to move to Kansas City. Why did you guys choose Kansas City to implement it?
Well, I think one of the most important things to understand is that Lambda is a company that believes in one GPU, one person. In order to achieve that dream of technological advancement and access to technology for everybody in the world, it takes infrastructure, and infrastructure has to be where the people are. Now, Missouri in central United States is a great opportunity. There's a lot of on-ramps to what we call our hyperscale cloud, like Facebook, Google, Oracle, all that stuff. There's access there. Missouri's invested from an internet and a network standpoint to actually create an environment that is actually beneficial for data centers to be there, to be able to spread out, throughout all the world, from technological capability. And we want to build, manage, run, and operate our data center space in a way that is allows us to be the most effective stewards of the resources we consume. We have a building there in Kansas City that was already a data center, and the power was already allocated to that data center. So our ability to come in and not upset the ecosystem, right? We were able to use the power that was already there. And now with the network that exists and the political climate that exists in Missouri to try and grow, technological businesses, that gives us an opportunity to grow with our community and grow the Lambda footprint there. And that data center had power. It already had land. It was already built. We don't have to do a lot of that work. So you're not really impacting the area negatively, which is sometimes perceived when you're building new data center spaces.
What do you think is going to be the local and like national economic impact of this move?
From a local economic impact, it's the beginning, of something that could be bigger, and more hyperscalers and emerging hyperscalers like ourselves are looking towards Kansas City. When you think about the potential for more data center space to be built there and what data centers bring to a community from a dollar value perspective, it's pretty good stuff. So all of those tradesmen, all the people that we have, like in the Kansas City area, with our data center and other data centers that are going there, they're going to be very, very busy. At the same time, each one of those data centers, we have facilities management organizations, the critical facilities engineers to do chiller maintenance, electrical maintenance, and all that kind of stuff, as well as the server break fix technicians. So you build kind of a community of people, much like you would with any factory. So there's direct and indirect job creation when you do this kind of thing. So we're just another leg in the stool.
Do you have a number of how many jobs you think will come initially, or down the line, will there be more?
Well, I'd say dozens, right? It's hard to put an actual number on it. We have a 28 megawatt actually, site there, and we have opportunity to scale. And as you scale, more and more people get added. And I want to be really clear. We're going to have a 24 by 7, 365 facilities and security, right? The more you put in there, the more people that you're going to have. So we'll have dozens of jobs that are built. We're also going to have like all the construction activity that's going to go on, and that tends to go on for quite a while. So there's great opportunity when you think about this kind of thing, and I think that's the most important thing to understand. We're members of the community that we're joining. We're partnering with everybody from, state, local, and federal and all the way. And we just want to be another leg of that economic development in a community. And we are deploying infrastructure right now where out of Kansas City, Missouri, we're going to be impacting people's lives positively all around the world. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right.
Our next story offers some insight into projected net farm income in Missouri this year.
Oh, so how's the agricultural economy doing?
Well, for 2025, researchers expect a 58% increase in net farm income, largely due to government payments, and a 17% boost in livestock receipts, largely driven by higher cattle prices. That makes up for the fact that crop receipts are expected to decline slightly this year.
Well, I mean, that's great news for livestock farmers this year, but how are the crop farmers approaching the anticipated drop in income?
Reporter Rebecca Jackson had similar questions. She spoke with Danielle Chin, a research consultant for the University of Missouri's Rural and Farm Finance Policy Analysis Center, about the factors driving the income projections and how farmers can be prepared. Here's that story.
Awesome. All right, thank you so much for doing this with me. So I guess starting off, what has led to the cattle prices being the main reason for this income spike?
So the cattle industry has been, for the past several years, seeing a decline in the number of cattle available. So you could say the inventory. And so obviously with supply and demand, when there's a lower supply of cattle available, prices have continued to increase. And then, of course, there's been other things that have hit the market, such as the New World screwworm that's tightened supply, as we've gotten less cattle and imports, I should say, in from Mexico, and some things like that. That's been the big driver behind cattle prices, is really just that tightening supply. And then, of course, when producers continue to see higher prices in the market, they continue to want to sell, so there's no incentive to retain their herds. So that's been the big push behind high cattle prices, if I understood your question correctly.
Yes. How have government payments also assisted in this increase, and why have there been government payments?
So government payments, there's always some government payments that are being rolled out to producers in every state. And so some of those come in the form of price loss coverage or agricultural risk coverage. So those are really popular programs. Another big push this year has been the American Relief Act of 2025. Well, that was passed in December of 2024 to help crop producers recover from, the economic losses they had seen. So that's been a really big boost, you could say, to government payments this year, and that's really helped Missouri's farm income.
Did the increase in cattle, this increase in expected income, put farmers' anxieties about their profits to rest, or should there still be a general concern?
It seems that the agricultural sector always goes in turns. It's like row crop producers do really good for a while, and then the livestock guys turn to do good for a while. So I think some of that depends on the diversity of operations and whether or not producers have one or more commodity to kind of help continue to keep their cash flow and their operation running. But I will say, tariffs on trade have been a big issue for a lot of producers in terms of concern, obviously. And so I do know soybean prices have started to increase slightly as of recent. So the Trump administration has been doing things to get soybean prices back up and things like that. So that's always great to see. But honestly, from a production standpoint, I think a lot of producers had a really good year. So I think that is a really, kind of hopefully an incentive to them as well, of if they did have a good year, maybe they could hold that crop over until prices kind of spike back up, hopefully. And, of course, the higher the production, the more you get to sell. So hopefully that kind of helps. And, of course, like I said, the diversity in operations always helps.
Yes. What would you suggest to farmers who grow a lot of crops and maybe not have as much cattle? What do you suggest they do in this situation?
I always think that if a producer is in a position to, for lack of better terms, ride the waves, I think that helps. But, if there's anything they can do, whether they talk to their bank and kind of see what their financial situation is, maybe they can get some extensions on loans, or maybe there's, like these government payment programs. Those are always really good things to do. So I would always advise them to talk to their agricultural lenders and see what their options are and, if there's any way for them to keep rolling, because a lot of these guys have, equipment payments and things like that. So it's not as easy for them just to sell out on a tough year. So my advice would be just to kind of, always evaluate their financial status and talk to their agricultural vendors.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well.
And now it's time for us to get into our words of the week. So Riley, what's your word this week?
Actually, I have 2 words again. I tend to do that a lot. But it is shipping containers.
I know we talked about tariffs a little bit earlier in the episode, so is it something to do with the supply chain?
Not this time. I'm talking about shipping containers being turned into homes by a company called Custom Container Living.
Of all things, why shipping containers?
Well, workers can finish the containers in warehouses so they're unaffected by weather, and the company controls every step, meaning no subcontractors. The containers selected have only been used once for shipping, so there's no risk of chemical contaminants from cargo. It became an attractive option for owner Robert Wagner as home building costs rose in the industry.
Well, I mean, that is certainly one new spin on the whole tiny home concept.
Yeah, but that's all I've got this week. What's your word, Noah?
My word is crushing.
So what are we referring to here? Aluminum cans, sport teams winning streak. I know the Dodgers just won the World Series and all that.
Well, not this time. Crushing, in this case, is the process of turning soybeans into meal and oil, which more Midwestern farmers have adopted.
Huh, and why is that?
Well, even though China has agreed to resume soybean purchases, the 12 million metric tons it's promised to buy this year is only about half of what the country historically purchases. So, farmers are selling more of their supply to be crushed or storing it to wait for better prices.
Huh, so is crushing soybeans able to make up the difference of not exporting?
Not entirely. While domestic soybean crushing capacity is growing as demand for renewable diesel rises, it's still not enough to offset the deficit. About half of all soybeans are exported, which has led to the rise in farmers storing soybeans to sell later in the winter.
So it sounds like we'll have to wait and see what soybean prices do later this year then.
Absolutely. And now it's time for our closing thought. For our closing thought, here's Danielle Chin, the Mizzou research consultant we heard from earlier, speaking on the financial outlook for farmers this year.
While row crop production has seen some losses and prices are lower, all in all, Missouri seems to be doing fairly well this year, thankfully. So, overall, the state of the farm economy is looking pretty good right now. And I say good as in good news, right? We're seeing good news as opposed to a bunch of decreases across all areas.
Well, that's all for this week. The M33 Project provided the music for this episode. For my co-host Riley Hindle and editors Trevor Grandin, Kayla Grimshaw, Kelly DeRook, and Michael Stacy, I'm Noah Grabianski, and this has been Business Brief. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.